Hi, my name is Kevin Turner. I work at Spanish River High School in Boca Raton, Florida, where I teach human geography and coach girls soccer. Love to travel, have been to 6 of the 7 continents, haven't quite made it to Antarctica just yet, and I'm a huge supporter of Arsenal, winners of the FA Cup. We're on APE Daily, we're going to start with topic 1.1, Introduction to Maps. So what are we going to learn in this video? Basically, I want you to know that there's 2 generalized kinds of maps that we use in our class, reference maps and thematic maps. Reference maps are called reference maps because they are informational. We refer to the map to get information. You might see a world map, a map of your city, or an evacuation map of your school in case of a tornado or a fire. Those are going to be maps that provide information about physical, man-made features on the surface of the Earth. They could be topographical maps showing you elevations of mountains. It could be a subway system map so that you know which stop to get on or get off. Or when you walk into a mall and you see that big map of the mall showing you where all the stores are and certainly where the food court is. But in our class, we're going to focus even more on what we call thematic maps. Thematic maps because they tell a story. They're going to tell us something about quantifiable data, something that could be numbered or measured. And when we say that it's a story, sometimes students will ask, well, how do I know the story of the map? Well, you read the title, kind of like you'd read the title of a book. So you're going to read the title of the map, and it's going to give you a clue as to what the quantifiable data is going to be shown on that map. Thematic maps, again, are the focus of our course, but they're also the focus of so many of the questions that you're going to see at the end of this course when you take the advanced placement exam. So each of the ways that I'm going to show you today about showing thematic data on a map is going to have some strengths and weaknesses, and we'll have some visual examples for you. So 5 of the key ways that we use geospatial data to display on thematic maps are choropleth maps, which use colors or shading, dot maps or distribution maps, graduated symbol maps, where proportionally the symbol is going to get larger or smaller, isoline maps, and cartograms. So let's take a look at each of these 5 kinds of thematic maps. The first thing I want to show you is I want to show you this reference map. This is the Glacier National Park, and this is a map provided by the National Park Service, where it shows shuttle stops. And I can see that there's different places where I can get on or get off a shuttle as I traverse my way across the park. But notice that this map is not showing me a theme or a story. I don't know which one of these stops has more people getting on or getting off of a shuttle. I don't know which of these stops is going to be located closest to places where there's more wildlife photo opportunities. So this map's not really thematic. It's just purely informational. I can refer to this map. Let's look at the thematic ones. First, the choropleth. We said that it's going to use colors or shading. Look over on the right side of the screen. You can see that there's a table there, a legend that's going to show me that the darker the color, and that's generally the case with these maps, the darker the color, the darker the shading, the more quantity of the data or the phenomenon that I'm trying to show. And of course, this map is showing us COVID-19 cases. You can clearly see there's states like New York, Illinois, Florida, Georgia, Texas, California, very high, very elevated. You can also see states like Maine or Vermont, West Virginia, Montana, Wyoming, very, very low numbers of cases, right? So that's a great way to show density of that data using a choropleth or a shaded or colored map. When we want to show distribution, a pattern or a spread of information, we're oftentimes going to resort to what we call a dot map. Sometimes it's even called a dot distribution map. In this case, we can see over on the right-hand side that one dot is going to represent 10,000 acres of corn that's being harvested for grain. And we can certainly see that the states that begin in the letter I, Indiana, Illinois, Iowa, all really high levels of corn being harvested. So when we see this dot map, we know that it's going to be distribution. It's going to not so great for density because, again, in an area of great density, look what happens. We get dots on top of dots on top of dots on top of. If I asked you to quantify and say, how many dots do you see in Iowa? That would be hard for you to do. When we say a graduated symbol map, it makes me think of a joke. Why did the dot map go to college? Because he wanted to be a graduated symbol map. So in this case, Kids sometimes will say, oh, well, there's still dots, but yeah, but look, the size of the dots is changing because of the quantity or the measurable data that we're going to look at here. In this case, this is number of plane enplanements or passengers getting on board planes at certain airports around the country. Look at Atlanta, Hartsfield-Jackson, Dallas, Fort Worth, LAX in LA, Chicago O'Hare. These are huge airports. You know, anecdotally, if you've ever flown before, you might have been through some of those airports and experienced, you know, a lot of delays and those kinds of things. Well, that's again partly because of volume. And so you can see over here on the right, lower right side, there's a scale there that shows you, a legend that shows you, right, how many people are boarding at each of those airports. And then we're going to use something here that's called an isoline map. I sometimes tell students this looks a little bit like a thumbprint, sometimes like a bowl of spaghetti, which can be a little confusing. But what we're going to see here is that the area of concentration is going to be, again, a darker color. Sometimes they won't use color on isoline. They'll just have the lines. And what you'll have to figure out is that every time you cross a line, you're going to be changing the value of that quantifiable data. It helps when they put the colors in there as well, but they don't have to. Sometimes you'll just see it with the black and white imagery there, and you'll know that every time you cross a line that you're going to change value. You also know that when the lines are closer together, you're changing value rapidly, and when the lines are farther apart, the value is fairly flat, or it's not really all that differing. Cartograms are going to be a little bit more unique in the sense that the physical size of what we're mapping is going to change according to the value of the data. I always try to think about a cartogram as almost like cartoon, right? It's kind of zany, whimsical. It's kind of almost looks like it's hand drawn. And so cartogram in that way helps me remember that it's not going to be true to geographical size. It's going to be proportional to the phenomenon that we're measuring again. So again, look at Florida, look at California, Texas, New York. This is, you know, census data population as of the last census. And so the states that are, you know, look at the Dakotas, you know, the two Dakotas there, they're almost invisible. Montana almost doesn't even appear. And that's because a lot of the states out there in the Mountain West and on the Great Plains are not all that populous. So let's take a look at some questions that they might ask on the exam. Let's practice together. So this map is a thematic map. How can we tell it's thematic? Well, we learned that the title is going to give away the theme of the map, dairy farms in the United States. And it says that the map shows the distribution of dairy farms. Well, remember, we talked about dot maps doing a great job of showing us a distribution. They're not so good at areas of concentration, and that's why we kind of see some, you know, areas of a lot of dots on overlapping with other dots. But it says the map shows the distribution of dairy farms across the lower 48 states. And it says each dot represents approximately 10 dairy farms. So I want you to think with me. What kinds of questions do you think that they could ask us on the exam based on the information that we can see in this map? They might ask us for places where there's a concentration of dairy farms. And we already kind of pointed that out: Pennsylvania, Ohio, Indiana, particularly Wisconsin. And think anecdotally. Has anybody ever heard of anybody that wears cheese on their heads at football games? Oh yeah, that's those people, Green Bay Packer fans who live in Wisconsin. Wisconsin's famous for dairy. So they might ask us about that concentration. They could also ask us about places where there doesn't seem to be a lot of dots. So we could look at the Deep South, across Texas and out into the desert Southwest. For that matter, most of the Mountain West and the Great Plains seems to not be all that, you know, populous with dairy farms. So definitely we can think about ways that a test item writer might ask us questions utilizing the information that we've learned in topic 1.1, Introduction to Maps. So what should we take away from this video? If a picture is worth 1,000 words, you've heard that saying, well, a map must be worth 1,000,000. Maps are the basic tools of geographers. We're going to use maps in this course to both ask and answer questions. What should you be able to do now? You should be able to identify the two main types of maps, reference and thematic, and you should be able to explain their purpose. You should be able to describe the relevant characteristics of the 5 kinds of thematic maps that I showed you today. And I also want to challenge you in your own life. Next time you're presented with a map, ask yourself, what type of map is this? What kind of information are they trying to show me? What kind of quantifiable data am I supposed to see on this map? And why have they chosen this type of map as opposed to maybe one of the other kinds of thematic maps that they could have chosen, but they chose this one maybe because it has a different way of showing that data, that information. Well, until next time, think like a geographer, and we'll see you on AP Daily.